Okay, welcome to SOL Review. Today we're going to start off with our first lesson on early humans, specifically referring to the Paleolithic and the Neolithic eras. Now, as we go through, what you need to start doing is organizing in your minds, right, what features are Paleolithic and what features are Neolithic. Keeping in mind that if they could do it during the Paleolithic era, they were also doing it in the Neolithic era, right? So if they were building fire in the Paleolithic, they didn't forget about that during the Neolithic. They just added on. Okay, so let's check it out. So, Homo sapiens, these are human beings species. Okay, in Latin, this means wise man. And scientists believe we started in Africa over 10,000 years ago. And from Africa, we migrated to Eurasia, which is like where Europe and Asia meet up, right? Australia, and eventually the Americas, okay? But you need to know that if you get a question that asks about where humans are believed to first appear, it's going to be Africa. All right, again, the term migrate just means to go from one country, region, or place to another. So as you can see, right in here, we call this the Great Rift Valley in Africa. We start here and we start going up to the north, right, into the west, into the east, and eventually crossing into the Americas. Okay, if you think way back when, during the Ice Age, there would have been an ice bridge believed to have formed between modern-day Russia and modern-day Alaska, allowing people to just walk. We call these early people hunters and gatherers, and they migrate, right, or they move around from one place to another to find food to survive. Okay? They relied on wild plants and animals. So early humans are hunters and gatherers. To find food, they are hunting animals and they are gathering plants and berries and things like that to eat. The problem when you are relying on finding your food as opposed to growing it is that eventually you're going to run out, okay? So they were nomadic. So these hunter and gatherers are nomadic. And nomadic means that they're not in one permanent location. So they're going to migrate in search of food, water, and shelter. From the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep, they are thinking, where is my next meal coming from? Okay? They did have simple weapons, like you can see in our little drawing there, spears and things like that, but they're made with animal bones or stones. We don't have metal at this point. We don't understand what it is. This is why we call this period the Stone Age, because tools and weapons are made out of stone. Okay, the other term that we call this is the Paleolithic era. It's also known as the Old Stone Age. Please write this slide down somewhere in your notes. Okay, these are the four big features of the Paleolithic era. During this era, humans figured out how to make fire. They lived in clans. So these are small groups, about 20 to 30 people, because if you don't know where your food is coming from, you don't want to have to feed a bunch of people. And they're also going to be nomadic. Imagine packing up 500 people as opposed to 50 people, okay? They developed oral language, okay? This is speaking. It might not be a sophisticated language like we see today, but the oral language is going to allow them to work together when hunting, when trying to relocate. And they're also creating cave art. And that cave art is super important to us today because we understand maybe what they saw during this time. Okay, so you need to know, get it in your head, that in the Paleolithic era, or the Old Stone Age, humans could make fire, they lived in clans, they developed oral language, and they created cave art. Here's some examples of some of the earliest known cave paintings, right? So we know that they probably had an animal that looked similar to an owl, or maybe a hyena or a jackal or something like that. Okay, so if you see cave art, it's going to be Paleolithic era every time. Now, eventually we progress into the Neolithic era, the New Stone Age. Neo, new, they both start with N. Okay? Please write this slide down, okay? And think about it. All of a sudden, they develop agriculture. Agriculture is a fancy word for farming. Okay, so they learn how to farm. And they're going to learn how to grow plants. So now, instead of being nomadic and moving from one place to another, they can stay put. Because they are growing plants, they have crops, and they also are going to domesticate or tame animals to use in farming. So now they have animals that they can help with plowing the field, but they also have animals that they can raise to eat. Okay? Now, this is how I like my kids to think about this. If you are wandering around, you don't have a permanent home, and your only focus is on food, you don't have a lot of time to worry about other things. Now, if food is all around you and you are settling down and you're living in a town, you have time in the day to do other things while those plants are growing. And this is where we get those secondary skills that developed, like making pottery and developing weaving skills. Because now you can take 2 or 3 hours in the day to figure this out, as opposed to we need to hunt, we need to gather, we need to move around. Okay? So the big difference between the Paleolithic era and the Neolithic era is that in the Neolithic era, they are staying in one spot and they develop farming or agriculture. Okay, so this picture, now take a look around. I know what you're thinking. These are not monkeys, these are early humans. We can get into that if we want, right? But just take a look at this picture. Do you think that this is from the Paleolithic era or the Neolithic era? Take a second to look around and see what you think might be indicators of one or the other. For me, I think this is the Paleolithic era, okay? Because you can see small groups of early humans, right? Hunting and gathering. I don't see any signs of villages. I don't see any signs of civilization. I see them following the animals to the water source. I see them naked, right? So they don't have weaving skills for clothing. Okay, these are two pretty big indicators that this is a depiction of the Paleolithic era. As you can see, the Neolithic era, right, we look more like humans do today. Okay, you can see that they have more sophisticated stone tools, again, because this is the Stone Age, and there's clothing. Okay, they're making advanced tools, there's clothing. These are two pretty good indicators of the Neolithic era. Okay, just so you guys know how we learn all of this stuff through archaeology. An archaeologist is somebody that studies history or prehistoric people and their culture. Okay, culture is things that kind of define you. Could be the language that you speak, could be the food that you eat, kind of what their lives are like. And we know this because of these things that we find and study. Okay, so archaeologists are going to study human remains, settlements, fossils, and artifacts. And carbon dating is used by archaeologists as a test to find the age of an artifact or fossils. I won't go into how that works, just kind of keep that term in your head. Okay. Stonehenge is an archaeological site in England. It's a very good example of this. We don't quite know a whole lot about it, but you need to look at that picture, and in your mind you need to think that is Stonehenge in England. A couple of early cities. These are going to be found in the Fertile Crescent, and I'll show you about where that is later, but if you can picture a world map in your mind, it's the modern-day Middle East. This is also known as Mesopotamia, okay, between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. So if you look at this map, kind of gauge where we're at. So over here on the Nile River, this is northeast Africa. This is kind of western, far west Asia, or the Middle East as we call this. Asia Minor. Right here would be the furthest eastern points of Europe. Okay, this would be like Greece over here. So Mesopotamia. These two rivers are going to be clear indicators if you see a map on your SOL test. The Euphrates River to the west, the Tigris River to the east. I remember this because of the movie E.T., right? The Euphrates is here, and the Tigris is here, E.T. Okay, and we call this the Fertile Crescent because it's in kind of a crescent moon shape, right? You can see this green right here. But we call it the Fertile Crescent because this is where land was very good for crops, okay? So the soil was very good, and that's where we kind of settled down. Okay, so humans are from the Great Rift Valley in Africa, but the first settlements are in the Fertile Crescent, also known as Mesopotamia. These are just 3 cities of the Fertile Crescent. Aleppo, which is in Syria, still a city today, right, as a lot of these are. Jericho, which is in modern-day Palestine. And this bottom one is Çatalhöyük, which is in Turkey. Okay, so here's what Aleppo looked like. Obviously, there's some modern additions like steel stairs. Jericho, and finally Çatalhöyük. And you can see these are archaeologists digging up artifacts and fossils. And real quick, an artifact is something that is man-made. So a piece of pottery, a tool, a weapon, and a fossil is something that's natural. So a skeleton, an imprint of a leaf, things like that. Okay, so this kind of summarizes up Paleolithic and Neolithic.